There we go. I
Hey,
think we're
okay,
live.
okay. I think we're live. Hi, Nikola, aka Socrates. How are you?
Fantastic, Joy. How are you today?
Very good. It's weird because Nikola just interviewed me for his. Do you call it a show?
Yeah, it's my podcast show, of
It's your
course.
podcast show, and it's a video. And originally, because when I read up on it, it sounded like kind of Church of Singularity. And since Nikolai was responding to my somewhat anti-singularity rant, I thought he was going to try to do some sort of trial by fire or crucifixion. And when I saw Nikolai interviewing other
Or
people, he
maybe
always had
save
this.
your soul and baptize you into the church, bring you into the church as a new recruit.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And you always had these pieces of paper, and you would quote people. And I sent you my thesis uh, with your assurance that you wouldn't quote me, but then you went through and quoted me. Do you remember that?
Did I? But I thought your assurance was just not to quote the pages because those could change. But I thought the
No,
content
no,
was fair play.
it's fine. It turned out fine, but I was worried that the content would change. But anyway, nice to have you on my show today. I've and it was a little bit weird too because I think you mentioned that you usually don't like to talk too much about your own ideas, and you usually are more of the interviewer. But I got you to talk about your own ideas a little bit. But that got me very curious to try to understand better the whole transhumanist movement. And I think of all of the people I've talked to, you have gotten as close as anyone to. I wouldn't say converting me, but increasing my sympathy. And so this is your shot at converting me and maybe some other people on the both the logic behind and maybe the philosophy of transhumanism. And I think there's a couple of different things. I think in one of your shows, you went after somebody for conflating singularity and transhumanism.
Hmm.
And so I thought maybe where we should start is maybe you can define for us what transhumanism means to you, but also broadly, because I think one of the things that we both end up, I think, getting is that we often end up being clumped together with other people that use the same term, but maybe we don't agree with. So maybe
Right.
you could describe what transhumanism is generally, but also what it specifically means to you.
Hmm. Well, so generally, the idea behind transhumanism is that science and technology would help us to overcome our very human, also human biological limitations. Now, that could include simple things like, for example, reaching a fruit at the top of the tree with the help of a simple stick. That's a technology that
So,
we
so a
adapted.
stick. So the minute we had a stick, we were already transhumanists.
Well, yes, under my interpretations, not
Okay.
all transhumanists would agree with that. So bear with me for a minute and I'll draw
Okay.
the line between me and the rest of the community.
Okay.
So the idea is that generally the two biggest limitations in the community are aging and death, right? But also intelligence. And so the idea of transhumanism is that science and technology would help us overcome our biological limitations, whether it's physical limitations such as reaching the top of the branches, whether it's intellectual limitations such as, for example, using a calculator or a computer or even a book, simple book, old school book, whether it's health sort of limitations, such as, for example, when we lose a limb due to an accident or due to cancer, and whether it's our limitations that are basically pre-programmed within our genes, that's to say aging and inevitably death. Now, where I kind of differ a little bit from the general idea of transhumanism is that I don't think there is really a hard line in the sand where we can say, okay, this beyond up until this point we're human, and after this point we stop being human and we become transhuman. To
Hmm.
me, even simple technology like picking up a branch already helps us overcome our limitations. And wearing clothes, wearing shoes, wearing glasses, having a car or a bicycle, everything that we've done for thousands of years, the wheel, has helped us overcome our biological limitations. And therefore, I don't see the hard line in the sand. And therefore, I would argue that transhuman is simply being human. That's what we do. That's what humans do. We come up with stuff to make our lives better, easier, more comfortable, safer, and so that we can live longer.
So then why have the word transhumanist if we're just being human?
Well, exactly, and that's been in the community. That debate's been in the community for a while, which kind of so. We also have even the term humanity plus, which is another attempt to sort of
Okay.
bring it more towards the humanist.
At least you didn't call it humanity 2.0.
Well, Max Tegmark has a book called, and he's from MIT.
Yeah, I know Max. Yeah, he's so okay, but sorry, I derailed you. So, but it sounds like so far you're just talking about augmentation.
Well, so we then the idea is that eventually maybe we would become even post-human, which is to say we become sort of disaugmented beings which do not require any biological representation or embodiment anymore, but we can become simply augmented beings that can move from one medium to another, whether it's carbon, whether it's biology, whether it's something else. And then we would overcome most of the limitations, including perhaps not simple death in the biological sense, but there are claims which go as far as saying that we might be able to alter the death of the universe or postpone the death of the universe.
So is it is it correct to say that in general you and the transhumanists are fighting to beat death?
Well, so first of all, I'm just a philosopher. Okay, so if fighting is like educating people, helping them ask the right questions, informing them with some current possibilities of the state.
But if you had, let me say this, if you had the ability to direct resources at something, and trying to eliminate and beat death was one of them, would you do that?
Yes, I would definitely do that. I wouldn't go all in the sense that it's a matter of balancing act between, let's say, preventing children's death, because we know there's something like, I don't know, 10 million children that die every year, which, by the way, is much better now than it was 5 or 10 years ago. But so definitely, I believe that we deserve a considerable sort of effort to at least postpone death and extend healthy life as much as possible and eventually eliminate it. So the answer is yes.
And you also believe that there's a good chance, good shot on goal that we'll be eliminating, let's call it, I think Yuval Harari calls it, become amortal. So it's not necessarily immortal, but that aging as a factor in death will disappear.
Well, look, the idea is that basically we are these very complex biological machines. Aubrey de Grey has the example of a, say, vintage World War I car or one of those World War I biplanes. We know everything there is to be known about the internal combustion engine, about how the plane works, what the parts are. So those were designed to work safely for maybe a decade. Now we have people who can fly those airplanes a century later and drive those cars and even go race those cars. By the way, there's vintage car races 100 years later, right, with Ford Model T or something, right? And the reason for that is that we have the science and we understand how each part works. We can produce each part as a part and we know how to put them all together. Now, the idea is that we take that metaphor and we say the body is a very complicated biological machine, and our understanding and awareness of how each part works gets better and better all the time. We know how the parts come together, and we're already working on being able to produce, whether it's with bioprinting or with all kinds of different ways, the parts anew, right? And then, therefore, eventually, the idea is that just like we're able to sustain cars that were designed to be driven for 10 years only for a century, likewise, we would one day will be able to extend human life that was designed to last maybe
So,
up to 120 years for
so
maybe centuries.
and do you think so? By the way, but just for full disclosure, I think that someday we will probably figure that out. I think it takes longer than many of my friends in Silicon Valley believe. So if we don't get it in time, well, first of all, do you think you're going to figure it out in time for you?
You know, I don't know, to be honest with you. Now, Ray Kurzweil says that we would reach what's called longevity escape velocity, which is to say so look, right now, every year that we get older, our life expectancy is being increased by about 2.5 months or so. And the idea is that,
Although it's going down in the US right now, actually mostly with young people, but
well, yeah, maybe the US because of, obesity epidemic and diabetes and all that kind of stuff. But on average across the globe, the idea is that science is helping us prolong life by about 2.5 to 3 months every year. And that pace of improvement or progress is also itself accelerating. So Aubrey de Grey calls that the moment that when we can, every year that we get older, we can extend human life expectancy by another year, is the moment that he calls longevity escape velocity, because at that moment we would basically be able to become, as you said, immortal, which is to say if we get run by a truck on the street or someone drops a piano over our heads as we're walking, we'll be dead, but we are not going to be succumbing to aging related diseases, and we would generally be able to live indefinitely, or at least to those bridge points. So let's say we extend life by 10 years, within which period we're going to come up with new remedies to cure all the damage accumulated for the past 10 years and so on indefinitely, right? So Ray Kurzweil talks about these bridges that you jump from one bridge to another. Now, personally, I'm not quite so certain it's going to happen at that time. I hope it happens for me. I'm not sure it doesn't. But to me, that's like a personal question. And that's not an interesting thing for me because I'm a simple philosopher. To me, the more important question is, so what? How does humanity change when that happens, whether it's 10 years from now or 100 years from now? Because you see, the very meaning of being human has been derived and very much related to our mortality. Right? And so once you take that out of the question, the very meaning of what it is to be human is up for grabs. And of course, when you throw in synthetic biology and the fact that we will be able to basically manipulate and reprogram our genes and change our sex, race, age, physical attributes and all of that, then it's not only personal identity and humanity, everything is for grabs. So everything that we thought we knew of for sure for the last, 10,000 years since our civilization started is up for grabs. And we have to redefine it.
So I know you want to, I want to talk about the science and the philosophy, but just I want to keep poking on you for a second. So,
Sure,
but you're going to freeze your brain, right? If you die before we've figured out how to fix the body, you're going to cut off your head and freeze your brain. Is that right?
Well, I am an associate member of Alcor Cryonics, and so, but I have not become a full member. So in principle, if it happens, let's say tomorrow, it may not happen that way. But in principle, the answer to your question is yes. I would want to get to a point where I want to become a full member, maybe with a different organization or what have you, and basically do either full body or neuropreservation. But the idea is that full body is kind of besides the point, because if they can bring people back at some point in the future, then you might as well get a whole new brand.
So who's the they? Is it some alternative future group that is going to revive you like a vintage biplane and fly you around, or what's?
Well, you have those Ford Model T clubs, right? People who basically go to junkyards and revive old, abandoned, rusted out cars. So imagine me and you now creating this record, and maybe, who knows, someone maybe as a joke, or maybe some fans in the future of this show and our conversation would say, hey, Joi and Ito look to be like two pretty cool guys to have conversation with. Why don't we revive them and bring them over to visit our club and have some nice discussions with us? Maybe they can ask some good questions, So, or maybe when you sign up with that certain foundation, a certain part of the money that you pay for your preservation goes into the endowment fund, and the endowment fund basically stays into the future and invested very conservatively. And then when the science and technology gets to a certain level, you can start using those funds to actually revive the people.
So, but you kind of have to have a little bit of trust in the future of humanity if you're going to do this, right?
Very much so. Not a little bit, I think a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
so let's go to that, because I was reading your manifesto, a Transhumanist Manifesto that you can Google and
Right.
find online, and it was actually quite helpful. And
Wrote that a bunch of years ago, and my thinking has
okay.
evolved since then. But that's
Okay,
fair play.
I'll give you. I mean, and you do say, I think, in your video that it's a work in progress. But
Right.
the part that I like, the line that I liked the most was, "We must all respect autonomy and individual rights of all sentients through the universe, including humans, non-human animals, and any future AI, modified life forms, and other intelligences." I think that's a very inclusive comment that is consistent with my view, and also one of my um, skepticisms about the word humanity, because
Hmm.
often we redefine humanity to be quite parochial, and we know through the history of racism, for instance, that humanity is a slippery definition, and we probably are causing a lot of things to suffer that we shouldn't. So I like that idea. The part that kind of got me. Uh,
Can I just
uh,
say something about
uh,
here about definitions, because that's very important since we're discussing
yeah,
this issue. So there's
yeah.
three definitions here at stake that are very pertinent to our conversation. One is humanity, and for many thousands of years we still do not have a commonly accepted definition of what it is to be human. So the best that I have personally come with, just so that you know where I'm coming from, is that humanity is a process, it's not an entity. And the meaning of what it is to be human is constantly rediscovered by each and every individual in each and every epoch and each and every generation over and over again. Now, the two other terms that we need to define are what is life and what is death. Now, let's start with death. Death doesn't have a definition, okay? Take Encyclopedia Britannica. In the first edition, in the 1768 edition or something like that, basically death was the separation of the soul from the body. Since those days, we have changed the definition of death 30 times in Encyclopedia Britannica, right? So, for example, in the beginning, it was the cessation of breathing. So we used to have the mirror test. Put a mirror under somebody's nostrils, and if they don't fog the mirror, they're dead. Then we started listening to heart. Once we don't observe heart rate, then the person was considered dead. Then in the 1960s in Harvard, they defined death as the brain death. Basically, if your brain doesn't have any brain activity, then you're considered dead. And every time the definition of death has shifted forward due to development of science and technology and medical understanding and ability for us to reverse this process. And now we have suspended animation, which in turn has challenged the brain death definition in its own right. So there's that issue that we still cannot define what death is. Then you go to biology, we don't even know what life is. What are the living things? And the line between death and life is not so clear. So, for example, viruses are somewhere in between. Are they dead? Are they alive? And sometimes viruses attack so-called dead cells, and they rejuvenate them and bring them back to life to become their own hosts. So, and of course, we have zoological examples of organisms who do not seem to exhibit aging and or death like humans do. So all those definitions are kind of like a little bit all over the place.
But you don't like biology, it sounds like, because here you say transhumanists of the world unite. We have immortality to gain and only biology to lose. What do you mean by that?
Well, look, so again, that was written 6 years ago, but basically the idea is this, that biology comes with certain costs, and I actually refer to those costs in the beginning. I say that first of all, biology is not the essence of humanity. Human is a step in evolution, not the culmination, right? But also, there's limited durability. There's death and poor memory retention. There's also limited speed of communication, problems in transportation, learning, interaction, and evolution. All of that baggage comes with biology. Now, I actually don't hate biology. I quite enjoy it, and I think we can improve in it so we can overcome or at least alleviate those limitations by a factor of who knows what, maybe 10, maybe 100, maybe 1,000. And in this case, maybe I would be able to embrace biology much more even, and would prefer to stay at that level rather than become totally disaugmented or augmented being, which is like post-human in its essence.
Okay, so you would say that since you wrote this, you may have evolved a little bit away from the anti-biology style, because you say things like we can break through the chains of biology, and
right.
but
And look, this is a manifesto. Manifestos
yeah,
are a
yeah,
lot
no,
more
no, I know,
declaratory,
yeah,
right?
yeah, no, no, no. I'm just trying to get the spirit of this.
Right.
But it is. Let me to go back to the original part about augmentation. It's really trying
Sure.
to use technology and science to
Overcome our limits
overcome the limits,
of anything.
and through design and science and technology, maybe beat some of the constraints that the biological evolutionary system has put on us. Is that roughly what?
Yeah, anything that you consider a constraint. So, for example, if you are an intellectual and you
Yeah,
have a problem with the fact that you can only read books so far to acquire knowledge, and a
but
fraction of the scientific papers published, every year,
yeah,
and you have a way to sort of have a new brain computer interface that allows you to sort of download, make matrix style all that knowledge in your head,
yeah.
many people would go for that. Other people, for example, who are born men but feel that they're women inside
Hmm.
for whatever reason, or vice versa, feel that they need to change their biology to
Hmm.
reflect their proper
So,
identity.
so yeah,
So each one, to each their own. Each one has their
yeah.
own
So,
limitation to struggle
so,
with.
so I think I like the ethical freedom, individual freedom part of this so far. But what does concern me when you said get rid of all constraints. So if you think about systems, like so, one of the reasons that the life expectancy in America is going down is not because science and technology can't do it. It's that we have a social system that's failing us, and people are getting addicted to drugs, and the system fails. We have enough. It's very funny when you read the website for abundance, which is another book about singularity
Peter Diamandis and
by
Stephen
Peter
Kotler.
Diamandis. Yeah, and he talks about how science and technology will make it so abundant that we'll have enough food for every man, woman, and child on Earth. Well, we do, at least for now, but we can't
Already, more
distribute
than
it
enough.
properly, right? So how do you think that we could solve? And this gets maybe back to this notion that you believe in humanity, but I'm concerned that science and technology isn't the answer to the complex systems problems that we have, like climate, like social inequity and health, and that we more science and constraints are actually important in nature to make sure that cancers don't go out of control or that populations don't collapse. So what's how does that work?
Right. So I agree with you entirely. As you know, I wrote a number of articles on that topic. So one is called "The Danger of Being Exponential." Another is called "Technology is the How, Not the Why or the What." And finally, probably the keystone one is called "Technology is Not Enough." So I agree with you that we need science and technology, but they're not enough. We need something else. And yes, system thinking is very, very useful here. And you give a great example of the current problems that we're experiencing in the United States, and to a slightly lesser degree in Canada, and so on.
Mhm.
But we also have
Yeah,
many good
and I think
examples.
that yeah, and that's kind of my concern with the movement is that a lot of the people who are involved in the
But
transhumanism
how is
and
the
the
movement
singularity movement.
responsible for that?
Well, a lot of the people who I believe that I know, and many of them that you know, are engineers who are working in very profitable, exponentially growing corporations who
Right.
are often producing science and technology without thinking about the second order consequences of society without thinking about the ethics. And in your manifesto, I think the best parts are the earlier thing that I read. And also, you're saying compassion is the ultimate measure of intelligence. I don't think most people that I know necessarily believe that. I think most of them think of intelligence as if you look at the OpenAI, I think their definition of intelligence is a machine that can win the game. And again, I think this is interesting because when you look at, you're kind of negative on the evolution, but Martin Novak from Harvard, who's does evolutionary dynamics, he shows that actually through research that altruism and actually cooperation are fundamental to evolution, and that the very rich complexity that we end up with that builds a resilience comes from the evolutionary dynamics of cooperation, and that in fact competition is only a small piece of evolution. But it feels like right now we have a very competitive environment where a lot of corporations and engineers are trying to build kind of the machines to take for singularity and for transhumanists to somehow transcend humanity without thinking about this complexity that you seem to be concerned about. Are there others like you?
Well, look. So first of all, it's my manifesto, so it's my opinion, and in my world, I come from this very sort of a Buddhist, if you will, kind of utilitarian in the Western world, sort of John Stuart Mill and Jeremy Bentham tradition, if you will, about diminishing suffering. Because to me, intelligence is useless if you use it to cause suffering, right? And by the way, which is also where I differ to a great degree to most people in the community, is that to me, life is not enough. So people would say, the leader of the current transhumanist party in the United States would say, life is right and death is wrong, and he puts a full stop after that. Right? I want to add, I want to say, okay, life is right, but that's not enough, because hopefully that life is for a reason, it's for a purpose. What's the point of having a good long life if you do nothing with it? Right? So to me, the question is, so what? Why? How? Why should you have that long life? What are you going to do with it, most of all, right? And to me, the answer is, my personal answer is to try to alleviate suffering and cause as little as you're going forth at the same time, right?
So are you? So you're like the Martin Luther of the Church of Transhumanism, hammering your manifesto on the church wall. Is that, or the door? Is that what's going on?
Well, first of all, I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult, or I don't know what it is. But I am not so important as him, that's for sure. And secondly, I'm definitely not of his rank. So yeah, it's just my views put forward, and whoever. And look, my whole point of my work is basically to create a symposium. And symposium is an idea that comes from ancient Greece, and basically is a drinking party. And the idea was that a bunch of people come together at the time of Socrates, and they had good food and good drink and enjoyed each other's company and discussed very important topics, whether it was law, ethics, aesthetics, love, friendship, war, religion, etc., poetry, and so on. And at the end of the night, hopefully, people left with a new understanding, new level of awareness than they came in with. And if Socrates, who was usually the host, did his job right, he was just a midwife to helping people giving birth to their own ideas, which is why all his students came up with these philosophical schools that were mutually incompatible. So I have a strong opinion of my own. I don't hide it, but I don't plan to impose it on people. It's just a bouncing point where they can sort of start to consider their own positions. And mine is that the highest level of intelligence would be aiming at diminishing suffering, at least as far as I'm concerned.
So I think you would definitely be on my good person list, and now I'm gonna maybe I'll stop shooting at you, but maybe ask you kind of as a close observer of the transhumanist movement. I think on your show you often criticize other people who are in the singularity and transhumanist movement. I mean, my fear is that there are a large number of people who are grasping for exponential growth at the expense of ethics and at the expense of nuance. And I fear that the because of the financial returns for
Yeah.
those companies that are exponential, that they have a asymmetric amount of power. And so even though there are some people with the nuance that I think is required for the ethics and governance of these systems, my concern is that overall the movement is fueling a kind of, I think it is kind of a worship, because when you start thinking about life and death and the allocation of your resources and your children, it gets as close to a religion as you can get without actually calling yourself one. And so I feel like the religion in certain forms is dangerous, because I think it again, it's funny. I think the when Martin Rees was still just a sir, he was talks about the cryonics lab that when they asked him to freeze his brain, he said no, and he just rather die when he was dead, and they called him a deathist. And
Right.
the idea that people who believe in death are somehow a different ist than the people who believe in immortality. So is that, do you see any danger, and how how concerned should we be? Because I think there's part of it that just feels weird, which I think is unfair. But the part that I think I'm concerned about is this something we need to stop? Is this something we need to turn?
Look, the transhumanist community is just like any other community. There's all kinds of people, and maybe even higher number of people who have, high advanced levels of narcissism and sort of personal hubris and so on. But that doesn't mean they're not good people, and that doesn't mean that it's not a noble cause. Because again, this is, and if you think about it, just forget about transhumanism for a second. This is what medicine does, supposedly. Medicine
Yeah.
is intended to alleviate suffering, right? The whole field of medicine. And let's say if it takes a double bypass or organ transplantation, or if it takes suspended animation, if they can do that, or whatever it takes, they would supposedly keep trying to save your life for as long as they know there is a chance, based on their current skills and knowledge, to do something about you, right? So transhumanism in that sense is no different at all. And medicine in time has progressed tremendously and has helped us a lot. And that's very transhumanist in this nature, in its essence, or you can say humanist, right? So I don't see that as a bad thing, alleviation of suffering, because also it can be very productive thing. Even if you look at it from, let's say, the GDP point of view, think about how many years it takes for someone to become a good professional. Usually we reach our professional peak between 50 and 60. And then we start diminishing due to the fact that our biology starts crumbling underneath us. But we are actually intellectually at the peak level at that time. And we only are able to transmit a small fraction of our knowledge to the next generation. So they have to rebuild almost from zero up. So imagine if we only give people 30 more years, let's say from 60 to 90, of healthy extended lifespan where they can work for another 30 years, how much that's going to help everything around us, right?
I don't know if it's going to help universities, though. We'll just have faculty who are tenured for a long time.
Well, universities have all kinds of problems of their own in our current world with, overpricing and the fact that knowledge has become free nowadays on the internet, and you can learn basically about anything as long as you're interested and committed of doing it without actually going to university. And in most cases, people go in most places. Now, if you're talking about brain surgery, that may be an exception, but in most cases, you don't necessarily need to go to university. So they have a number of other problems. So if I can save humanity, look, every day we have somewhere between 100 and 150,000 people die from old age. So if we have to have problems with the university and save 100,000 people a day, I would say save the 100,000 people, because that's tremendous suffering right there. And it's not only their personal suffering, but it's the suffering of the people around them and all of that.
And I'm sure you get this question a lot, but in systems dynamics, there's a great book by Donella Meadows called The Limits of Growth, which says that in any constrained space, you have to have a limit to growth because you run out of resources. So what do you think about the population and just increasing and keeping things around? There's a reason why we recycle things.
There is, and nobody said that with the help of science and technology we cannot close the loop. Right? Much better and more efficiently than we are doing right now. And perhaps one way we can do that is if we extend those people who are at their peak between 50 and 60 and give them another 30 or 40 years of productive scientific lifespan, that they can produce so much better tools and science that can help us close that gap, right? But generally, can you just repeat the question again? So
I think So there's two things.
The limits of growth you're talking about.
Yeah. So how do, because I feel also is basically it sounds like you trust humanity and society more than I do, because my initial inclination is that we're going to have a population explosion and all the wealthy people will get the science first, and you'll get Trump, Mugabe, and Putin living forever before everyone else.
So are we to say then that, because Putin or Trump or Mugabe can have a quadruple bypass or an organ transplant or a, pacemaker chip like Dick Cheney did, by the way, are we to say that all those were inventions that we should have never invented and we should have never started using them? Just think about it, right? So every technology comes with a good and bad side, which is why, as I say, my work is about ethics and about filling that gap that you pointed out in the community. And my thesis from the get-go has always been technology is not enough. And I want to bring in ethics precisely because I share many of those concerns that you have. However, I don't think that we can say, well, Putin can extend his lifespan, therefore let's ban and let's have all those 100,000 people a day keep dying. And of course, we know that we agree with that, because this is why science keeps progressing. And look, let's talk about overpopulation. The biggest challenge right now is not overpopulation, it's our overconsumption. And let me give you another example. We don't need one iota of better technology and we can easily double the population that we have today. We know that currently we can sustain easily 14 billion people on our planet today. The only difference, though, that we need to do is a behavioral difference, which is much harder than a scientific difference, apparently, because we need to switch from a meat-based diet to a plant-based diet. Because right now, 70 or 80% of the corn and soy and grain that's grown around the world doesn't go to feed people, but goes to feed animals. And we know that we kill something like 70 or 75 billion animals a year, every year. And somewhere between 1 and 3 trillion fish, by the way, which is where, again, ethics comes, and which is where, again, you see personal behavior choices without any change in technology can easily diminish the cost to the environment that we put currently, and can give a lot of room for our population, by the way, without the animals.
Did you know that the Emperor of Japan 1,300 years ago, Emperor Tenmu, banned livestock for ethical reasons and for sustainability reasons? So it's not a new idea. I think it's actually a good idea. But I think so. But let's take that idea. It's not a new idea. It's a good idea. But it's a very difficult idea to get people to adopt. And many of the technologists are the people who, some of them are in your camp, but many of the technologists, I feel, kind of want to brute force their way through by trying to use science and technology to gain without giving up. And so yeah.
So this is a perfect example. So for example, When I went vegan about 2 years and a little more than 2 years ago, lots of people from the transhumanist community are like, well, I would wait until we have 3D printed meat. But then the question is, why wait? Why do you want to persist doing damage to the environment and to the animals, and by the way, to your own health, which is, of course, again, why we have that obesity epidemic and all that stuff happening. Why wait when you can actually, for technology and science to one day, maybe in a decade or so, give you that option when you can make that choice today, right? Me and my wife, we went cold turkey vegans overnight. We just said we're going vegan tomorrow, and we went vegan. And that was it. And so I completely agree with you that people, and the other, by the way, inconsistency in the community, which I often want to point out, is the fact that, we all want to extend our lives with all that science and technology and cryonics as a plan B. But we can actually do a lot today with proper nutrition and proper lifestyle choices. But most people in the transhumanist community, unfortunately, don't seem to be interested in that. So that they would be very overweight, they would eat all kinds of garbage, they would drink a lot of alcohol, many of them even smoke. In other words, they do all those life choices that we know cause diminished longevity and healthy lifespan. And yet they would rely on science and technology. And that, to me, is not a good ethical choice, because we know there's negative externalities to the environment, to the animals. It doesn't help our health, it diminishes it. And I think that's why I keep pushing forward personal responsibility, personal choices, and personal ethics, because we can go a long way with those. And I think actually, even if we're not ready by making those choices in advance, even if science and technology give us that life extension, then it will just perpetuate old bad habits. So, for example, imagine you're an alcoholic, but you're a very rich one, and then you have a very poor alcoholic, right? And imagine we have perfected 3D organ bioprinting. So we can print new livers for people for a large number of money. So if you're a poor alcoholic, you're going to die because you can't buy a new liver. But if you're a rich billionaire alcoholic, or you do lots of drugs or whatever, and you destroy your liver, you can keep printing new livers, and you can keep, transplanting them into your body, and basically continue this kind of suicidal, self-abusive and damaging act instead of actually addressing the act, right? And I've gone on the record a number of times trying to point that it's more important to address the behavior that we can address right now than simply rely on outside help from technology and from science.
So it sounds like while you are a transhumanist, this whole movement represents a lot of concerns for you that we need to address before we put the jetpack on, right?
Well, look, this whole movement possesses lots of promise and lots of danger, just like any other movement in the world. So for example, and I wouldn't say that Francis Fukuyama called transhumanism the most dangerous idea. I don't agree with that. I think that there's a number of very dangerous ideas out there, and transhumanism is not the most dangerous, in my opinion.
Do you think it's dangerous, just not the most dangerous?
I don't think it is dangerous, because I think it's mostly natural. I think what's dangerous is things like, for example, nationalism taken to the extreme. I think what's dangerous is and what's worrying me is generally not transhumanism and transhumanists, but militarists who think that they can solve the world problems with military force. In a nuclear world where we have like 7 or 8 and a growing number of nuclear capable countries, and where we have, sort of decentralization and democratization of, the science and technology with which we can produce weapons of mass destruction, whether chemical or biological kind. Maybe not nuclear, but chemical and biological, probably. And so those are a lot more dangerous things to me. And to me, the most dangerous thing is probably human stupidity. And human stupidity is not limited to transhumanists, by the way. Human stupidity is very popular among politicians, among heads of state, apparently, both in the West and in the East. And many of them have their fingers on the nuclear button. So those are things that I'm a lot more worried about, that I'm worried about transhumanism, you know?
Interesting. Well, it's getting up on the hour, and I think I asked most of the things. We didn't get too far into the science, but I will. Why don't I go ahead and go on the record that I'm not sure I agree with everyone's time scale on beating death, but I think it's something that's coming. And I think that I think that we need to. I think humans are quite adaptable, so I think our systems will adapt. But I think just like any change, like even climate change, we're going to have a lot of suffering through that transition process. And I'm not as optimistic as some people. And you, I think you were on the record that you're not that optimistic about uploading the brain. Is that right?
Well, I hope, and I also think that right now we have a lot better scientific evidence to say that chances are we're making more progress in terms of healthy lifespan extension via a number of different ways rather than, let's say, uploading the brain. Because the brain is the most complicated thing that we've got. One of the most complicated things in the universe, if not the most complicated things in the universe. And our understanding is very far from complete right now. Whereas our understanding of our biology is also very far from complete, but I think we're a lot further down that path, you know, with CRISPR and genetic manipulation and we don't know which bush the rabbit is going to jump out of. So, for example, with Methuselah flies, I think it's only 2 genes that you need to tweak, and their lifespan jumps by a factor of 5 or 6, right? So 2 genes. Now, humans are obviously a lot more complicated, but we don't know which and where we're going to tweak something, and that may not give us immortality, but it may give us another 20 or 30 or 40 years, right?
I do think, though, just looking at genetic engineering, is that everything has trade-offs and side effects, and there's a very interesting story that I heard from a scientist who was working. He was looking at babies, and he noticed that, interestingly, that autistic babies tended to have higher brain folding, more bronchial folding, and more intestine folding. And some of them were more intelligent, but they all had respiratory and GI problems. And his hypothesis is that there's a gene that increases folding. So your brain folds more, your bronchial tubes fold more, and your intestines fold more. That's his hypothesis. And that as we try to get more intelligent, we know that more surface area of your brain might make you smarter, but you end up with more problems in your. So I think that and that may not be true. It's just a hypothesis, but to me that gives you kind of a good image of what genes do, right? So you turn one gene, it doesn't just increase your intelligence or increase your height. It also changes a whole bunch of things. It's very fractal, and I think
it's
especially with
complex system.
And also with life, you know, you once something may only happen once you become 200. You know, so I think it's an interesting question, because I don't think, at least today, we have models that are sophisticated enough to design the kind of interventions that we would need. So I think we can fiddle with things that show like telomere lengthening or you know, flies to live a little bit longer, but I think it's quite complex and much harder much harder to be completely accurate than we would imagine.
I agree, but don't you agree with me, though, that it seems like we have made a lot better progress along that path than the path of brain uploading?
Yeah, I agree. I'm pretty skeptical of mind uploading. I mean, I think my joke is, I think the types of people who believe in mind uploading are the kinds of brains that are easily uploaded.
Okay, that's a good one. That's a good one. And there's a number of neuroscientists which would agree with you at the cutting edge, by the way, and
Yeah.
there would be others who would disagree with you. Just like there are people who think that telomere lengthening would prolong life or extend healthy lifespan, and others who think that it would cause cancer, for example, right? So to me, it doesn't matter which bush the rabbit comes out from. To me, we have 5 or 6 different strategies that we're pursuing currently right now, sort of in parallel. To me, the more important question is, so what? So whether I'm lucky enough to be there and benefit from it personally or not, humanity would still have to grapple with this question, so what? And that would come out in the form of collectively, what does it mean to be human as a definition, but also personally answering the question, who am I? Right? Which is going back again to ancient Greece in a way, where we had above the door in the Temple of Delphi, we had the inscription, know thyself. And I think, again, let's close the loop again, that the closer we are to knowing ourselves and who we are today, the better we're going to be capable to control and direct that new science and technology towards better ends rather than self-destructive ends, right? Because if we're not ready for all that power that technology and science is giving us, we can totally self-destroy ourselves and destroy most life, if not even all life on our planet, but probably most life, right? So
yeah, and I think that's actually right. I think that self-awareness, thinking about these questions, asking these questions is essential. So that part of your show and the transhumanist movement I like. What I don't like is the more organized religion, like blind worship and faith that technology will solve everything. So they go on being unethical, not taking care of the environment, and just kind of
right.
literally Hail Mary
And
and
selfish.
ready.
There are examples, and I agree with that, and I've argued with these people. So, and of course, every movement has a fraction of all kinds of people, right? So, and there is definitely sort of religious undertones, and different people take that to a different level. So, just like most religions, transhumanism promises you immortality in the literal biological sense, right? So it's kind of it has become for some people a religion. Okay. And so, for example, when I mourn the death of another species and the fact that we are causing the extermination of whole species, kind of wholesale, people just tell me, oh, don't worry, we'll bring them back at some point later on. We got their genes, we'll bring them back. But what's commonly missed is that, let's say we bring the woolly mammoth, right? It's never going to be the woolly mammoth, because the woolly mammoth is not just a biological creature, but the woolly mammoth was a herd of woolly mammoths which had a special, unique kind of a social structure, which was only developed within the context within which, or the epoch within which, they lived and thrived. And so today, you may kind of recreate biologically a woolly mammoth or even a herd of woolly mammoths, but they would learn from normal elephants. So they would never be woolly mammoths in the sense of their social structure. And we know elephants have very kind of complex social structures. We know they mourn their dead. We know that they go and pay their respect to places where an older elephant has died or something like that. So the social structure, the culture of the woolly mammoth will never be brought back to life. Even if we have a biological representation. And to me, that's a part of the great loss that we're experiencing right now, right?
Yep.
So, and secondly, it's very selfish to say, oh, it's okay, in the long run, we can destroy them all now, we can push them to extinct, and we'll bring them back eventually. So I've gone to argue with people like that, but again, this is only a fraction of the community, so let's not blame the whole community for the sins of a few.
And
I'll put
hopefully
that in religious terms for you.
And hopefully the machines that bring you back are as thoughtful as you.
Well, look, and again, I'm personally, as I said, I am a philosopher in a simple kind of a philosopher, like Socrates was, rather than a complex one like Kant or Hegel were. But to me, personally, I hope I can benefit from it, but that's not so important. The question is about humanity. It's not, I'm just like an infinitely small speck on an infinitely small speck in an endless universe. So who cares about me? The question is about humanity. The question is what's our what do we leave after us? Whether it's individually as persons or collectively as a species. Do we make the world a better place? Do we make it a worse place? Do we alleviate suffering or we cause suffering? Because if we cause the death of 75 billion animals a year, the extinction of species, and we're now in the sixth extinction, the annihilation of the global environment in all kinds of ways, and climate, and the water cycles can get messed up and all of that, then clearly we're not being good stewards to our most prized possession, which is our planet, and we only have one of it. And so just to show you where I also differ with some people like Elon Musk, whom I respect very much, for example, is that people say, well, don't worry about destroying the Earth. We're going to colonize Mars and then the universe. And that's all great. I'm all for that. But let's not destroy our best planet, because look, this is as close as heaven we can ever find. I mean, Mars would never be as perfect for humanity as Earth is for us right now. So let's not destroy our perfect heaven right now, right here, in the hope that, okay, we're going to colonize the universe.
Okay, well, we're on past the hour, so I'm going to wrap this up. That was a great ending, Nikola, and I look forward to continuing this conversation. And you have moved the needle for me towards compassion to the transhumanists, and I may bother you with some questions some other time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joi. It's always a pleasure, and I hope next time we get the pleasure to do this in person, perhaps.
Yes, definitely. See you.
I'm old-fashioned that way.
Yes, well, come on by.
All right. All the best.
Bye-bye.